They mocked her broken rifle. Then she hit every target blindfolded. Even the Navy SEALs froze. The training range was alive with the sounds of gunfire. Metal clanged.
Team,
Shells
targets
ejected.
ahead. Ready.
Recruits
Fire on
shouted
my mark.
numbers as bullets tore through paper targets
Cease fire.
downrange. But at one corner of the range, something unusual was happening. A small group of recruits had noticed a new female recruit struggling with her weapon. The rifle in her hands was old, scratched, and broken in several places. She tried to adjust the sights. She tried to chamber a round properly. Nothing worked. The others couldn't help but laugh. "Hey, need some help, rookie?" one yelled. "Looks like she brought a toy to a real range," another sneered. Even the experienced instructors shook their heads, unsure whether to intervene. But the girl didn't respond. Her name was Ava Torres, a quiet recruit with a calm expression that never betrayed frustration or fear. The mocking grew louder. The recruits circled her like predators sensing weakness. Her rifle clanked again, misfiring, and a few rounds bounced harmlessly into the dirt. Laughter erupted. "Give her the blindfold. She might hit the barn at this rate," someone joked. The crowd laughed harder. But Ava didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't even glance at them. She simply adjusted her stance, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly, as if calculating something they couldn't see. The instructors glanced at each other, sensing something unusual. Because even with a broken rifle, Ava's movements were precise. Every grip, every posture, every breath was measured. The group of recruits continued their mocking, unaware that their assumptions were about to be shattered. Then the lead instructor, a grizzled veteran with decades of experience in SEAL training, stepped forward. He looked down at her rifle. He saw the scratches, the bent sights, the so-called broken weapon. He looked at Ava's calm, steady expression. And then he smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "All right," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "let's see how good you really are." The recruit stopped laughing, sensing the change in tone. Ava reached into her pack and pulled out a thin black blindfold, tying it securely over her eyes. A hush fell over the range. Everyone assumed it was a joke. A blindfolded recruit with a broken rifle? Impossible. But Ava stood perfectly still. Her fingers caressed the worn stock, her breathing steady, her mind focused. The whistle blew, and the first target downrange was about to be revealed. Because within seconds, everyone, including seasoned Navy SEAL instructors, would realize that this quiet recruit was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The laughter had stopped. The challenge had begun. And the range would never be the same again. The range was silent now, except for the distant echoes of gunfire from other recruits. All eyes were on Ava Torres. She stood blindfolded, gripping her broken rifle with an uncanny calm. Her stance was perfect, feet planted, shoulders squared, breathing slow and measured. The first target appeared downrange. A small metal silhouette, barely moving in the afternoon wind. The instructors exchanged glances. "Do you really think she can hit that?" one muttered. Ava's finger hovered lightly on the trigger. Then a soft click. The bullet struck dead center. Gasps ran through the ranks. The second target popped up, this one farther away, partially obscured by a barrel. Ava adjusted her aim using the feel of the rifle alone. Another soft click, bullseye. Murmurs grew louder. Recruits stared wide-eyed. Some of them started to shift nervously. The third target appeared, moving slightly. Most would have panicked, even experienced shooters. But Ava didn't waver. She breathed, held, and fired. Another perfect hit. The laughter from earlier had completely vanished. The rookies who mocked her stood frozen, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. Even the instructors, hardened Navy SEAL veterans, leaned forward, their eyes narrowing in disbelief. A fourth target appeared, a smaller silhouette, positioned awkwardly behind a stack of crates. Ava tilted the rifle slightly, feeling the recoil, calculating distance and wind with practiced precision. Bullseye. Whispers spread across the range. Is she really blindfolded? Did she just hit 4 in a row? No way, this isn't possible. The recruits' confidence had crumbled. Their smirks had turned into wide-eyed fear. Ava's blindfold remained in place. She didn't remove it. She didn't gloat. Every shot was deliberate, controlled, lethal in its precision. Then the lead instructor stepped forward. His voice carried across the range. 5 more targets. Let's see if she's a fluke or a master. Ava didn't flinch. She simply nodded and adjusted her grip. Targets appeared one by one, some small, some at impossible angles. Each time, the rifle barked, and each time, Ava hit her mark. By the time the last target fell, the mess hall of recruits was silent. Even seasoned SEALs froze. Their jaws tight, eyes wide. The broken rifle, the blindfold, the mocking laughter, all of it had been a setup for a lesson no one would forget. Ava Torres stood calm, the blindfold still covering her eyes, rifle steady in her hands. And in that moment, everyone knew she was not just a recruit. She was extraordinary. The laughter had ended. Respect, and a touch of fear, had begun. The shooting range remained silent. Not the usual quiet of discipline, but the kind of silence that comes when people realize they have just witnessed something impossible. Ava Torres slowly lowered the rifle. The blindfold was still tied across her eyes. 10 targets. 10 perfect hits. The recruits who had laughed earlier now stood frozen, their confidence completely shattered. One of them whispered nervously, that rifle was broken. Another replied, barely breathing, and she was blindfolded. The lead instructor stepped forward, boots crunching against the gravel. He stopped a few feet in front of Ava. For a moment he simply studied her posture. Perfect balance. Perfect trigger control. Perfect composure. Then he spoke. Remove the blindfold. Ava calmly untied the cloth and pulled it away. Her eyes blinked once in the sunlight. The recruits stared at her as if they were seeing her for the first time. Because now they understood something they had completely missed before. Ava hadn't been guessing. She had been calculating. Distance. Wind direction. Sound echoes. The slight movement of metal targets. All of it had guided her shots. But what shocked the instructors most was the weapon itself. One of them picked up the rifle and examined it carefully. The sights were bent. The trigger pull was uneven. Any normal shooter would have struggled to hit one target with it. Yet Ava had hit every single one. The instructor shook his head slowly. That rifle shouldn't even work properly. A quiet murmur spread through the recruits again. Then the commander arrived. The range instantly snapped to attention. The commander had been watching the entire demonstration from the observation tower above. His face was calm, but his eyes revealed something different. Recognition. He walked directly toward Ava. The recruits watched nervously, unsure what was about to happen next. The commander stopped in front of her. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. Still shooting like that, Torres? A few instructors suddenly looked at each other. They recognized the tone. This wasn't the voice of a commander speaking to a recruit. This was the voice of someone greeting an equal. Ava stood straight. Yes, sir. The commander nodded once. Then he turned to face the stunned recruits. Earlier today, he said calmly, some of you laughed at her. No one moved. You thought her rifle was broken. Silence. You thought she didn't belong here. Several recruits lowered their heads. The commander folded his hands behind his back. What you didn't realize, he continued, is that Ava Torres isn't just another recruit. The range grew even quieter, because the next words were about to change everything. And when the commander finally revealed who she really was, even the seasoned Navy SEAL instructors would freeze in disbelief. The entire shooting range stood frozen. Dozens of recruits, seasoned instructors, even the wind seemed to pause between the targets downrange. All eyes were on Ava Torres. The commander stepped forward slowly, his boots crunching across the gravel. He looked at the broken rifle lying on the table beside her. Then he turned toward the recruits. Some of you laughed when you saw that rifle, he said calmly. No one answered. You thought it was broken. A few nervous glances passed between the rookies who had mocked her earlier. The commander picked up the weapon and held it up. The sights are bent. He tapped the side of the barrel. The trigger pull is inconsistent. He tilted the rifle slightly. And the balance is completely off. He paused. which makes it the perfect weapon for a test. The recruits looked confused. A test, someone whispered. The commander nodded slowly. Yes. A test that most of you would fail. He turned back toward Ava. But she didn't. The commander looked across the line of stunned recruits. What you just witnessed wasn't luck. He pointed toward the fallen target's downrange. That was muscle memory, battlefield awareness, and years of combat training. The rookies exchanged uneasy looks, because suddenly the situation felt very different. Then the commander said the words that changed everything. Ava Torres completed Navy SEAL Special Operations training 3 years ago. The entire range went silent. Even the instructors stiffened. She has operated in environments where visibility was zero, the commander continued. Where weapons malfunctioned. Where survival depended on instinct, discipline, and absolute control. The recruits stared at Ava, stunned. They had laughed at her, mocked her, thought she was weak. The commander continued. She volunteered to return here undercover. Now the confusion grew even deeper. Undercover, one recruit whispered. The commander nodded. She was assigned to observe the next generation of recruits. To see who had the discipline and who didn't. The 4 recruits who had laughed earlier suddenly looked like they wanted to disappear. The commander looked directly at them. You judged her by a broken rifle. He paused. But a real warrior doesn't need perfect equipment. He gestured toward Ava. They adapt. They overcome. And they succeed. The commander turned back to Ava. For a brief moment, the entire range watched in silence. Then something unexpected happened. The commander raised his hand and gave Ava Torres a sharp, respectful military salute. The instructors froze. The recruits stared in disbelief. Because a salute like that was not given lightly. It was a sign of respect, of recognition, of honor. Ava returned the salute calmly. No pride, no arrogance, just quiet professionalism. The recruits looked at the targets again. 10 perfect hits. Blindfolded. With a broken rifle. The same woman they had laughed at minutes earlier. The commander faced the recruits one final time. Let this be your first lesson. His voice carried across the range. Never judge a warrior by appearances. He glanced at Ava. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous one there. The wind moved softly across the shooting range again. The recruits stood in silence. And the story of the woman who hit every target blindfolded with a broken rifle would become a legend every recruit would hear for years to come. Her name was Ava Torres. And the day the Navy SEALs froze in disbelief was the day the rookies learned what a real warrior looked like.